As a premier community in Hampton Roads, James City County strives to maintain a high quality of life for all citizens through sound fiscal management and legislative actions. In an ongoing effort to increase transparency, your Board of Supervisors holds public meetings to garner citizen input before making important decisions. Here is tonight's meeting agenda. Stay tuned. The Board of Supervisors meeting will begin shortly.
I call to order this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors for a regular meeting. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon represents the Roberts District. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Larson represents the Berkeley District. Mr. Hipple?
Here.
Mr. Hipple represents the Powhatan District and is Vice Chair of the Board. Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower represents the Jamestown District and is Chair of the Board. Adam Kinsman, County Attorney, is present, and I am Scott Stevens, County Administrator, and it's my pleasure to be Clerk to the Board.
Okay, we need a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate remotely due to an ongoing medical issue that prevents her attendance.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. McGlennon?
Yes.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hipple?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, Sue, you are part of the meeting. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will have a moment of silence, and then I'm going to ask Michael to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sounds good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I get a pen?
Absolutely. Would you mail him one?
Absolutely.
Okay, we have no presentations, I believe, this morning, or this afternoon, and then public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No, sir, just a couple public hearing comments, so no public
All right,
comments.
so no public comment. We will start then with the consent calendar. Consent calendar today consists of minutes adoption, and we have a resolution for Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance violation at 2618 Chickahominy Road, and a resolution for Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance violation at 2640 Chickahominy Road. Would anyone care to remove any of those for a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve?
Okay, and I will note that there was one technical date correction on one of the minutes that was already done. So we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hipple?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Move to our public hearings, and I would like to acknowledge that we have our Planning Commission representative, Mr. Jack Alderman, in attendance. Thank you. Our first one is Z200001, Norge Center Proffer Amendment, and Brett Meadows will give the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mr. Vernon Getty of Getty, Harris, Frank, and Hickman, LLP, on behalf of Norge Plaza, Inc., and Chesapeake Bank has applied to amend proffers to allow office use at 115 Norge Lane. The property is zoned B1 general business, and professional offices are permitted uses on properties zoned B1. However, existing proffers on the parcel limit uses to a shopping center. The proposed use does not fit within the definition of a shopping center, and the proposed proffer amendment would allow for office use in addition to the shopping center use. The existing 52,915 square foot building previously served as a farm fresh grocery store. According to information provided by the applicant, the location will not have retail banking. The existing vacant building will be repurposed, and no new development or construction is proposed other than the renovation of the interior of the building. According to the applicant, Chesapeake Bank plans to use the building for its Chesapeake payment systems. Operations include phone support, electronic communications, or on-site support at a customer's place of business. Chesapeake Bank also plans to use the building to consolidate the call center and other support personnel that are currently in multiple locations throughout James City County. The applicant states that the use of the vacant building would provide space, allow pooling resources, and allow for growth. The proposed use is compatible with the B1 zoning designation and with the currently adopted comprehensive plan. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve of this proffer amendment. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions, and I think the applicant
Any
is-
questions for staff at this point?
Well, I have a question, and I hope I haven't missed something in the interim. Is this your first presentation before us, Mr. Meadows?
It is.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
We will then have Mr. Haldeman come up, if you don't mind, and give us the Planning Commission report on this one.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Planning Commission, as you know, unanimously recommends approval of this application. I might even say enthusiastically recommends approval, citing, in addition to all the staff points, the significantly lower traffic that will originate from this facility as opposed to the original Farm Fresh, and the fact that it's a repurposing of an existing retail business building. Also, one of the commissioners suggested shrinking the size of the parking lot and adding green space, which the applicant agreed to do. So those are the 3 points. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I had asked the question of staff earlier because I noticed, the gas places on the photo, and not having been up there recently, I guess I was unaware that it had already been removed. So
I hadn't been aware of it either.
yeah,
but
that was one of my first questions. But if they have agreed to try to reduce the scale and put some more green space back in, that'd be wonderful. So, any other questions for Mr. Haldeman? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open the public hearing, and I have one speaker card from Vernon Getty with the applicant's rep.
Chairman, members of the board, I'm Vernon Getty. It's a pleasure to be here tonight representing Chesapeake Bank. Lee Hoagland, the regional executive for Chesapeake, is here, and Tom Tingle, the project architect. We think this is a great reuse of this abandoned grocery store building, and for all the reasons stated. I do want to clarify the initial construction is all interior. The discussion around landscaping parking lot would come in a second phase, but their immediate goal was to get the interior of the that we would ask. I'd answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Getty?
No, so I did, because I was reading the minutes and from the Planning Commission when reviewing the agenda, and I did say that it would be considered. So, but I like that suggestion. I understand that you want to do the front first, but any improvements that can be made in that area would be greatly appreciated. I think when I talked with you as well prior to the meeting today, and that grocery store did fill. I was living in Mirror Lakes at the time, and there was nothing up there. The closest was Ewell Station, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have young children, it's a lot. And so, But as noted, there's now Food Lion and other grocery options up there. So I am glad that there was an applicant that was willing to do something innovative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Very much.
Gady. Okay, if there are no other speakers, I will close the public hearing and look to the board for a motion or discussion.
I'd like to make the motion to approve, please.
Okay, Sue, we have a motion from,
I have a question before we go to motion.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to be forthright to know that Chesapeake Bank is my bank I deal with. So I just wanted to, I don't have any ownership in Chesapeake Bank, but I wanted to get that out there before we went to the vote. So there's, and Adam, there's no conflict there as far as banking with a bank, but there's no ownership or anything else. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody knew that that's my bank. And before we get to that point, I'd like to say, you know, banking with Chesapeake, what a wonderful bank it is, what a good partner it is. I mean, when Chesapeake Bank came into our community, when they first came here, they were the first bank to reach out to me to help me with the Norge train depot and getting that moved and putting a fundraiser together for the community to get the Norge depot moved. And that was when they were brand new, had just gotten in the community. And it took a long time to get that project moved, but it wasn't for, you know, if it wasn't for what Chesapeake Bank did at the initial part, helping me get a fundraiser going to get money generated to try to move that. So thank you very much. And it wasn't forgotten. Appreciate it.
thank you. Mr. Stevens, we have a motion?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hippel,
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan,
Aye.
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Our second public hearing is Z 19-0003, Ford's Colony Proffer Amendment. Mr. Alex Baruch will give the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Ms. Susan Tarley of Tarley Robinson PLC has applied for a proffer amendment for Ford's Colony to address the allocation of remaining units, traffic improvements, and outstanding proffers. Ford's Colony is zoned R4 residential planned community and is designated low-density residential on the 2035 comprehensive plan. Ford's Colony is nearing full build-out. The master plan, not including the continuing care retirement communities on the south side of News Road, allows for up to 3,250 dwelling units. Approximately 2,857 units have been constructed to date, and other lots have been platted but have not yet been built upon. The subject properties listed on the application include those properties where new development is still planned. Specifically, there are 104 dwelling units that remain to be constructed on 4 parcels that have a residential designation on the master plan. The overall purpose and intent of this proffer amendment is to specify the division of these units between these 4 parcels, the remaining traffic improvements that need to be constructed as a part of the build-out of Ford's Colony, and eliminate traffic-related improvements which were listed on the original proffers but are no longer necessary. At its April 1st meeting, the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the application. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approves this application and acceptance of the amended proffers. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Questions for staff?
I just had one. I understand that as part of the cleanup of the proffers here, that we're now recognizing that because of the Long Hill Road plan, the idea of providing a bike lane on that side of Long Hill Road is no longer necessary. But I wasn't quite sure what the alternative that was being offered was.
Yeah, so on the Long Hill Road corridor study, they show a multi-use path on the other side of the road, and then a sharrow on the road on the property closest to Ford's Colony. But Ford's Colony is, as a part of these proffers, providing a dedication during the Phase 3 portion of the corridor improvements for dedication of property that they own.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Brew.
Other questions for staff? Mr. Alderman, care to?
Just remember to speak into your.
Yeah.
Again, Planning Commission unanimously recommends that you approve this application as well. In addition to all the reasons that staff gave, we did discuss the bike lane. It was brought up as a concern because a bike lane and a multi-purpose lane are not exactly the same thing, and I guess there was some concern that bikers couldn't be safe to have bikers and walkers and strollers and so forth. Same. It was pointed out that much public input went into the Long Hill Road Corridor study at the time that it was laid out, and that these concerns were all addressed. The other concern that arose was if density could be transferred among the 4 parcels. And the answer to that is no, at least not administratively. The applicant would have to come back for another proffer amendment. So the distribution of dwelling units is set among the 4 parcels. That was our consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Haldeman? Okay. Thank you, sir. All righty. We will open the public hearing, and I have one speaker, Mr. Drew Mulhare, for the applicant.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am Drew Mulhare, the General Manager of the Fords Colony Williamsburg Homeowners Association. Ms. Susan Tarley with Tarley Robinson represents our Homeowners Association. I'm standing in for our Homeowners Association Board of Directors and our application partners in deference to the minimizing our physical presence here tonight. We have submitted an amendment to the Fords Colony proffers and have joined in our submittal by the parties who own the remaining undeveloped residential parcels in the Fords Colony community. Nearly 2 years ago, county staff contacted the Homeowners Association to express a concern that the former developers' proffers were delinquent in regards to the required periodic traffic study. The ensuing conversations with staff reflected that no one entity remained that could represent the continuing master plan interests of Fords Colony, and that remaining multifamily parcels could potentially transfer density to the disadvantage of other parcel owners, and that most of the roadway improvement proffers dated in 1987 were either completed or were likely unnecessary based on projected build-out and traffic estimates. The Homeowners Association stepped up to address the changes that were necessary to the existing proffers to permit the continued orderly development of Fords Colony as intended by the master plan. We worked with the other applicants and were able to reach agreement on all the issues that have been submitted with the amended proffers. As stated in the staff report, there are no unfavorable factors to our request, and our request does not change the gross density. We are primarily updating the existing proffers to correspond with how Fords Colony has been developed and the remaining areas to be developed. We are very grateful and commend staff for helping to discover a path towards resolution and working amicably with us. This is an extraordinary action by our Homeowners Association and the entities that now own the undeveloped parcels simply after foreclosures nearly a decade ago. There have been considerable expense in traffic studies and legal fees. However, we are very pleased to make this proposal as the right thing to do to help correct an unfortunate situation that had no exit strategy. We respectfully request approval of the amended proffers, and Ms. Tarley and I are certainly available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Mulhare or Ms. Tarley? Okay, thank you. Close the public hearing. And before we proceed with asking for a motion on this one, I will also raise the issue that I am a resident of Fords Colony, but I believe that this has been one of those things that has been through a very serious vetting process, and I'm especially pleased that all of the participants that are the property owners in there have agreed, and so I believe that I can vote on this without conflict of interest. So,
correct, sir.
it would be to vote on it. I will look to the board for discussion or a motion.
Motion for approval?
We have a motion for approval.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, we now move to board considerations. Our first is establishment of a full-time building security and custodial services superintendent position. It was Grace Boone.
Hey, Ms. Ripley.
Oh, we have a change to the schedule.
Good evening, Chairman Eisenhower, members of the board. I'm Joanna Ripley, the Assistant Director of General Services. The Department of General Services respectfully requests the establishment of a full-time building security and custodial services superintendent to be effective July 1st, 2020. Although this position was proposed to be established in the fiscal year 2021 budget for January 2021, with the impact of COVID-19, General Services is asking that the position move forward to July 2020 for increased oversight of the custodial services section is needed for scheduling, additional cleaning, ordering, and delivery of custodial and personal protective equipment for county departments. The position will oversee the custodial, the advanced planning, organizing, and directing of daily operations of the custodial services section, as well as monitor and evaluate operational effectiveness of the safety and security program within the facility. Funding will be made available for this position through the General Services budget. The position will oversee daily sanitation and cleanliness of all county facilities and work in partnership with building occupants to ensure a safe and secure working environment. The position will ensure adherence to industry standards for custodial practices, methods, and procedures. The position will monitor budget expenditures, conduct site visits, develop reports, and provide recommendations on program or service improvements. The Department of General Services requests that the James City County Board of Supervisors approve the establishment of a full-time building security and custodial services superintendent position effective July 1.
The only question, you did say that was covered in your FY21 budget.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the adoption of the resolution.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, number 2, Skimino Creek Watershed Management Plan, Board Adoption. Mr. Michael Wilson. Nope, we got somebody else.
Hey, good evening.
My program isn't very good today.
Not Michael Wilson. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. I'm Tony Small, Director of the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division, and I'm here with Senior Watershed Planner Mike Wilson to present the Skimino Creek Watershed Management Plan for the board's consideration. This is the county's 6th watershed management plan and is similar to the other approved plans in that it encourages improved management of the county's resources through development and private property owner incentives. Minnow Creek Watershed, located in the northeast portion of the county, is the 3rd largest watershed in the county at approximately 15 square miles in size and is subdivided into 8 subwatersheds. 4 of those 8 subwatersheds drain directly to the York River to the north. Approximately 29% of the overall watershed is urbanized, while the remaining 71% is rural. The Watershed Management Plan identifies environmentally sensitive areas and develops specific protection, restoration, and infrastructure retrofit recommendations, including 19 strategic actions for watershed protection. The plan also identifies watershed restoration opportunities, including potential projects for the county's capital improvement and maintenance programs. We are happy to answer any questions that the board might have and recommend adoption of the resolution.
Okay, questions?
I don't really have any questions. I just want to say that the county has put an awful lot of effort into developing these plans over the years, especially staff. And I'm pleased to see another one of the plans move forward.
My only question, you said this is the 7th plan?
I believe the 6th.
6th, okay. And we have what, 11 watersheds? I wasn't sure of counting them there.
We would have 8 that we would do a plan for.
8 we would do a plan on. So we're getting close to getting the plans
For the entire county.
for the entire county that we wanted, because I know it's a lot of work to get one of these things done, and to get caught up to where we have them covered is really, I think, very important. The only other question I had was Are our watershed plans, as we're now going, take a look at, pervious cover that's there by sub-watershed and what we would like to target, so that when we look at land use cases, the board has the ability to go to the sub-watershed and say, okay, for this particular case, here's what our watershed plan says we should be targeting, and to make sure that we're trying to, whatever we're approving, we're trying to be compatible with the plan.
It depends on which plan you want to reference specifically. Some of those have that data explicitly in the report.
Okay.
Others would be derived from the GIS.
Okay. Right, that was the only question that I had. So I will, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the adoption of the plan.
You have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Revisions to Chapter 5 of the James City County Personnel Policies Procedures Manual. And I guess it's supposed to be, oh, it is Mr. T.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, to remain competitive in the marketplace, adjustments to our benefit package can be an important tool. Staff proposes revisions to Chapter 5 of the James City County Personnel and Policies and Procedures Manual, Section 5.4B, Number 3, to increase annual carryover of paid time off from 12 months to an 18-month accrual. Also, revision of Section 5.4B, Number 4, to provide 3 hours of sick leave per month for our hybrid retirement program staff who currently only accrue paid time off. Lastly, revision of Section 5.4B, adding Number 10 to provide a floating holiday to all staff to bring the county's total number of holidays closer to our competitors in the market. Staff recommends approval of these changes.
Questions for Mr. T?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment, in that I'm not a big fan of PTO, so I appreciate the change. And the reason being because I think that people tend to maybe come to work when they're not feeling well, because they can then turn around and use that time, an extra day on vacation or something like that. And I think if we've learned anything, please let it be that if you're sick, please stay home. So I do appreciate some effort going towards letting some sick leave start to accrue. So, and, if there, I hope this will be, I appreciate that you all saw an issue and are working towards a solution, and I hope we'll kind of keep those communication lines open so that moving forward, if we continue to see an issue about sick time, we can reflect on that, because we want to do what we can do to keep our employee and their coworkers healthy. So,
Great,
thank you. So want me to move the motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll move the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens?
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, sir. Okay, number 4, authorization and appropriation for the contribution to the Greater Williamsburg Small Business Relief Fund. Mr. Chris Johnson.
Evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. At your May 5th work session, staff presented a summary of what peninsula localities were doing to provide financial assistance to their small businesses in response to the financial hardships resulting from reduced operations and business closures due to COVID-19. The consensus expressed by the board last week was a desire to provide financial assistance to county small businesses through a contribution to the Greater Williamsburg Small Business Relief Fund, a public-private partnership effort by the Greater Williamsburg Partnership and the Williamsburg Community Foundation. The Community Foundation has partnered with the Virginia 30-Day Fund, a volunteer-powered nonprofit that provides $3,000 forgivable loans to qualifying Virginia-based small businesses. In addition to the established 30-day fund criteria that small businesses must be established for at least 1 year, be owned and operated by a Virginia resident, and have between 3 and 30 employees, any contribution which is authorized by the board would carry an additional restriction that designates that these funds be used exclusively to benefit James City County small businesses with a current business license. Staff recommends that the board adopt the resolution contained in your packet, which authorizes the county administrator to transfer $500,000 in funds from the Capital Projects Fund to the Special Projects Fund, and further authorizes additional appropriation from the Special Projects Fund of the $500,000 for the specific purpose of benefiting qualifying licensed small businesses in James City County. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Johnson?
Let me make a comment rather than a question, and that is that I've had some discussions today with Mrs. Sadler, and I know she's been very diligent in going back and forth on getting some clarification on this. The biggest issue that I had with the initial proposal was the idea that there were no clear criteria beyond the ones that Mr. Johnson just indicated about them being operating businesses in the county. And so expecting that there will be more applications than there will be funds available to satisfy those applications, I wanted to have a clearer sense of on what basis the choices are going to be being made. And as a result of that, Ms. Sadler talked with the director of the Virginia 30-Day Fund, and he indicated that they would provide us, I think by tomorrow, with some criteria beyond what are listed in that original resolution. Those criteria would include things like that the funds would be used in order to allow companies to maintain payroll or health insurance or utilities or a combination of those, that there would be transparency in the sense of an opportunity to review what was being awarded, and I think in addition to that, that Mr. Johnson would have an opportunity to review before the final announcements were made, just to make sure that they're consistent with the profile of our county businesses. I think there was something else, Sue, and I may be blanking on that at the moment, but I know that was reflected. You conveyed those criteria, and those would be implemented by the organization in terms of evaluating the groups. So I was pleased to see that we have another set of criteria to know exactly what the uses of that money would be as we go forward.
Thank you.
So if I could just tag on to that, thank you, Mr. Glevin, for requesting that, and I think that's an excellent piece to this. Yes, you're correct. They did confirm that they will be sending that criteria memo to us tomorrow, and that to include with what you just said, the payroll, it applies to payroll or healthcare, rent, or utilities, and that applicants have to submit a video explaining what their business is about and what they're going to be using the funding for, so they can properly allocate the funding to the right businesses. That's part of the criteria. If they do fill out their application properly, and that Office of Economic Development will put that final quick okay on it, just because they're familiar with our local businesses. And I did ask them to add, because I talked with Mr. Johnson about this, is that because we have working partners, Greater Williamsburg Partnership and Williamsburg Community Foundation, they'll be providing 2 people from their foundations that will be directly, I don't know what the right word is, overseeing this funding to make sure that it does in fact go to James City County businesses. Then it lands on Mr. Johnson's desk for the stamp of approval, and then we're good to go.
Thank you, Sue.
I'm sure Ms. Sadler wants to do the motion.
Well, I'm
but
sure she does.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for all of your work, Chris, appreciate it, and also to Ms. Sadler and for her work, and to my colleagues who I know vetted, et cetera. But I know it's been put together in a relatively short time, and I do think that it's important to work with our businesses to try to help them get some relief during this very, very trying time. So.
The only thing I would add is that after discussions, I think everyone saw the email that came out from the state about the funding, the federal funding that's coming down to us, and that there is the potential, which we will address in our next board consideration, to get reimbursement for COVID-related expenses, and that this particular program looks like it may be one where we can use some of the money for that. So that would something we can look forward to once we get that up and running. So, Sue, if you would like to make the motion.
Yes, sir. I'd be most proud to move to approve the resolution for appropriation of contribution to the Greater Williamsburg Small Business Relief Fund.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Down to number 5, COVID-19 reopening guidelines. Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chair, we've packed in a lot about COVID. There were some asks from the board of updates, so we've got a number of presenters to give a short update, and then if you have questions, they'd be happy to expound upon that. We would start with our Commonwealth attorney, Mr. Nate Green, and let him tell you what's going on in his area of the world.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am your elected Commonwealth attorney, Mr. Nathan Green. I'm here to update you on how your Commonwealth Attorney's Office has both adapted and adopted some new policies in connection with dealing with the COVID problem. We have developed ways to continue to work safely while still pursuing and protecting justice for our citizens and our community. There are 19 positions within the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. One of them is not filled at this time. It's a paralegal position that we were in the process of recruiting and looking for applicants for. So when March began, we had 18 employees. On March 16th, the Supreme Court issued an order that suspended the hearing of all non-essential cases. What that means is if you are an individual that is in custody, then your bond hearing, your preliminary hearing, or your trial is to go as scheduled. If you are, however, not in custody, if you are already out on bond, or if you are at home waiting for your trial date, then your hearing was suspended and could not be heard in the courtroom for 21 days. That took place on March 16th, and we have gotten subsequent orders that now carry us through June 7th. The hearing of non-essential cases could not be done. It has now been opened up a small window. The court can start to hear non-essential cases beginning May 18th if they deem it safe to do so. So we have had a lot fewer cases going forward in the courtroom, but I will make it very clear, there is a tremendous amount of work that goes into every criminal case well before it enters the courtroom or gets called by the judge. That work was not eliminated or suspended in any way. That work still had to go on. We still continued to receive new cases while still having a bottleneck of all those cases that weren't coming to the courtroom. In the first week after the court issued its order, and the first week after the governor began to issue the shelter at home recommendations, our office went from 18 people inside to 2 people inside and 16 out. Myself and our office manager worked from within the office to try and coordinate as best we could those cases that were going forward. I spent a lot more time in the courtroom that first week. Frequency was up, duration was down. I would go to each and every courtroom for some amount of time to handle what few cases were still being heard in those courtrooms, and then go back and regroup. While I was the individual that was in the courtroom, I guess you could say we kind of took on a big firm mentality. I was the mouthpiece. It was the staff and the attorneys working diligently from home to continue all the work that went into preparing those cases for court. They prepared them. They sent me updates and briefings by email or by phone, and then I went into the courtroom and took credit for it. That work continues. We have started to shift the balance some. In the third week, we began to bring some additional people back into the office, and we got up to 3 people in the office, and then with 15 outside, That was also the week that we had 2 individuals that separated from our office voluntarily. That got our numbers down to 16. We are now continuing to work towards, I hope by the beginning of June, we'll have about a 50-50 split of 8 individuals working from within the office, 8 working from home, doing all the things that they would normally be doing at their desks, but just doing it from a desk at home. I'd like to thank Patrick and the IRM team who worked with us extremely well and assisted us in order to get that access and that ability for everybody to be working from home with borrowed county laptops and VPNs that gave us the access to being at the office without actually being there. We continue to work closely with the judges to identify those cases that need to be heard in the courtroom. We do not want a citizen to spend one single day incarcerated as a result of COVID. If they are incarcerated, it's because justice calls for it, not because we couldn't hear their case because of this pandemic. I think we've done a very good job of staying true to that priority. The judges have worked wonderfully with us. Our sheriff's department has been doing a fantastic job of making sure the courtrooms and the courtway and the courthouse is safe for all the attorneys and the citizens that come. I think we're doing a fairly good job in some very trying times. And I'm open to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. A couple questions I had. One, for people who are having their hearings put off like this because of COVID, when it does come back, how's the sentencing? So say you got a DUI and luckily do not know, you lose your license for X amount of time. Will the time be from the actual, when you're able to get it back into the courtroom, or will it be, can you go back to, and if maybe DUI is not a good thing to use here, I'm just trying to.
No, Ms. Larson, I think that's an outstanding idea and question. I think what you're kind of referring to is time served.
Right.
And if an individual was incarcerated, if they were incarcerated for 30 days leading up to their court hearing, and the judge gave them 45 days, well, they would get credit for those 30 days. And then they would only have to serve an additional 15. Those cases where individuals are incarcerated are still being heard. Those individuals that are out, they don't get any credit for time served because they're not serving any time. And
So it's from the time of your actual trial or sentence.
And so if an individual was arrested for DUI back in November of 2019, they would have the privilege to drive since 2019 because they were not convicted of that crime. If they were to be convicted in July of 2020, that is when the 12-month license suspension would begin, upon their conviction, not upon their arrest.
Okay, great, thank you. And then how are you, with everyone working from home like that, how are you keeping things confidential? Because I imagine you've got some very sensitive things.
Yes.
So how are you working that out?
Again, with the IRM, did a wonderful job working with us in the office to develop VPNs, and I took a survey of every employee. How many of you have desktops, laptops, printers, access to networking at home? Everyone did, but none of them were secure laptops that the county put a stamp of approval on. So that first week, one of the biggest things we had to do was all IT related, trying to get those laptops, get them out to the at-home employees, get those virtual private networks set up to maintain the security. There are certain components that there is no amount of security that can be allowed when it comes to things like criminal records, driving records, other things that the state police put incredible security on and that have to be done from within the office. And that's the reason why we had to start shifting some people to within the office. And then what we cannot send it over digital airwaves, but what we can do is we can hand it from one of us to one of them. And so we have a schedule of when the attorneys or when the staff come to the courthouse. We meet them out in the back parking lot, and we do an exchange. They give us the materials that they've been working on at home but no longer need. We hand them the criminal records, the driving records that could not be communicated digitally. and it's just that hand-to-hand transfer.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next, Mr. Chair, is Chief Reinheimer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman. It's a pleasure to be here. Give a brief update on where we are right now as a police department. Equipment-wise, we're doing great. Other than the first week or two when many things were scarce, things have been much more available over the past month or two. So equipment-wise, we're doing well. Calls for service, overall, we're seeing a decrease in calls for service, which is a good thing to see. However, we are seeing increases in certain types of calls for service, such as domestic assaults, mental health type calls, things like that we expected. We kind of knew that was coming, and we've seen it. I have actual numbers if anyone would like any numbers, but we've certainly seen those increases. Crime in general is pretty constant. We haven't seen a huge increase or a huge dip in crime offenses in general, but everything else is operating very well. The vast majority of our police officers work the road and respond to calls, so we're doing the same thing we were doing prior to the COVID incident as far as responding to calls. We haven't been as proactive as you would imagine in some of our enforcement measures. Not a lot of traffic stops going on unless it's something really egregious or something we can. But as we transition back into a more normal life, we'll certainly start to take more of a proactive role in trying to keep the communities in. That's kind of what I had for an update. I would also like to mention, please, if I could, this is National Police Week this week, typically a week that's filled with memorials, the Police Unity Tour, candlelight vigils, all those things have obviously been postponed or canceled, but that is going on this week. So it's a way to honor the 22,000 plus law enforcement officers who've died in the line of duty in this country. So please keep them, their families, and all law enforcement in your thoughts and your prayers this week as we move. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything for me.
I was noticing, I think it was in the paper this morning, that they were getting fewer speeding stops, but really, really high speeds. Have you noticed the same thing?
We haven't seen that here.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of the same stories you've seen.
Okay, yeah.
In some communities, they are seeing that. We haven't seen very many of those, thankfully. We don't have the interstates that we patrol typically, and I think 199 you can only get going so fast, so that's a good thing.
Questions for
You, have you seen more in domestic and alcohol-related issues recently, since everybody's kind of housed up together?
Sure, yes, and we have our domestics, and we compared this same time last year to the same time this year, and our domestic violence calls are up 14%, which is a pretty significant number. It went from 152 to 173 during that same time period last year, so we're definitely seeing that. Mental health type calls, we're seeing an even larger increase. The increase amount is over a lot more mental health type calls this time of year.
And I had a few citizens, and I corrected them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they were mentioning the police now are out and about, wandering around, watching how many people are gathering. And I said, no, they're not out there patrolling gatherings. If they see something, they may say, hey, let's break it up, and you've got too many, but they're not actively out there looking for gatherings and that might be occurring who knows where. But I said, no, our police department has got too many other things they're doing to wander around the streets and look to see if there's 10 or more people. Am I correct?
Most of the incidents we're seeing or responding to are because complaints come in.
Right.
If an officer happens to be doing something and sees something that is a violation, we will certainly do our best to educate those folks, but we're not actively going out trying to search for those types of violations.
That's what I told them. I said they don't have the time to go out and ride the roads and search for a group of 10. So thank you.
I just wanted to first thank you for reminding us about the recognition that we owe to our police officers this week, and I think it is very important to recognize that service and the sacrifice that's made by our police officers here and across the country. I am curious about whether you anticipate or whether you have a protocol in place for the possibility that as we do start to open up things and some establishments may for instance, require masks to be worn in a store or something like that, and there's a conflict. We've seen this happening all over the country, I think, at this point. Are you anticipating that there may be a need to respond to situations like that, and how might it play out?
I hope there is not a need,
Right.
but I anticipate that potential. You know, we prepare for just about everything we can prepare for. So we've had those discussions, we've had those conversations. We are still of the mindset of we're going to educate as much as we can. You know, if we get those types of complaints, we'll try to get that voluntary compliance that we typically get. And I know I mentioned this previously. We live in a tremendous community, and by and large, everyone is pretty compliant and do what is asked. But I've seen some of those stories too, and some incidents that turned very ugly when law enforcement tried to step in to resolve those issues. We're prepared to deal with any of the issues that come up. Hopefully those won't.
Ms. Sadler, did you want to go before me, or are you okay?
Oh, thank you. No, the only thing I would just add is that just thank you, sir, for your service, and please express our thanks to all the men and women who serve with you and under you and for you and around you and everything that you're doing to keep us safe. It's just different times right now. So I appreciate you looking out for our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to provide the update. So just a few questions. One, community policing, I take it, is the programs more is on hold. How do you see that for the future? Have you talked about it?
Sure, and most of those programs are on hold. Our Citizens Police Academy was put on hold. A lot of the firearm safety classes, a lot of the crime prevention and some of the community policing events have been postponed or outright canceled. We are starting to utilize technology a little bit better. We've done some Zoom presentations on reducing scams, especially with the COVID-19 issues. So we're starting to use some more of that technology. I think as we integrate back into a more normal, we'll certainly start to see more of that, and we want to get out there. Our community service officers are just dying to get out there, and they're staying in touch. They're staying in touch with the community leaders and the business leaders and responding to any issues that they have, but we're just not holding those meetings like we used to, and we're not doing those trainings like we used to. Depending how long this goes on, we may start looking at computer type ways to do all that kinds of things, just kind of depending on seeing how far it goes and how long it goes.
Thank you. And so when you have numbers like this that have risen, when your officers go out to a call, I'm sure sometimes, an arrest takes place, but a call such as a mental health, how are you handling that? At what resources?
Our mental health calls, they're constant. They're always there. It's daily. We deal with folks that are in crisis, mental health crisis, and we're still dealing with those situations pretty much the same way that we have. Bed space shortage isn't as pronounced as it was before. We still have CTAC down at Riverside where we take folks to so they can be screened. So we still respond pretty much the same as we have for those types of calls. We're just seeing a few more of them than we used to. Our goal there is always help, help, help. I think I've mentioned this before. When I was a young police officer, we came across somebody in some sort of mental health crisis. We did everything we could to arrest them. That's what we did. We took them to jail because that was the only place we had.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we do everything we can not to arrest them, but get them the help that they need that will make them much better off in the future. So we still do that. We're still doing our best to get the services to them that they need and not arrest them unless we have.
Thank you. And then you said that right now you are for PPE, you're okay. So are you starting to build up so that you have more on hand moving forward?
Sure, absolutely. We have a whole room dedicated to in our building that's got a lot of that in there. And the way the supply has been coming in now, I think we're okay.
Okay.
We don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But unless we see some really, really outrageous spikes and things, we'll be fine with it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you and your officers are doing. It's much appreciated.
Mr. Chair and the board, I don't have a presentation from Chief Ash, but he is here for questions. Do you have any questions of Chief Ash before we bring up Rebecca?
Maybe he can just update us on how he's doing on PPE and,
I'm sure he can address that. I didn't tell him to be prepared, but I'm sure he can handle whatever. So, Chief?
Good evening. Yes, your question about PPE, is when we spoke back in March, that was one of our biggest struggles, and since then, we have been successful in acquiring PPE from a number of different sources. One of those through the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, the requests that we made through the state, and we've had those filled. We started early. I honestly started back in the middle of January trying to order supplies to get ready, and we kind of anticipated we'd make all these orders hoping to get some of them at least filled, and they would all arrive within about 2 weeks of each other, and that's exactly what happened. By the time we started getting PPE, we went from being nervous about having enough to all the orders came in about a 2-week period. So we're very comfortable right now with our number of N95 respirators. We're good on gowns. We have plenty of gloves, and we're continuing to reach out. As Mr. Stevens has mentioned before, those supply chains have caught up now, and we're able to order supplies and get them in much more of a normal time frame where we were looking at 6 and 8 weeks of shipping estimates before we're able to get those. So on hand today, we have enough for the next, I'd say, 4 to 5 months at least. And then we're constantly looking at when we should order to make sure that we're on top of that if this was to come back in the fall or stretch out through later in the year. So we're very comfortable today where we are.
thank you for everything y'all are doing as well.
I've got one, Chief, and this is more of a firehouse, in-house type joke. But how much chrome will be allowed on a fire truck? And y'all may not get that, but that's a kind of a firehouse joke. We always want as much chrome as possible on any fire truck.
You're trying to get him to commit now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just cheer them up a little.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief.
Rebecca Van Root will come up and tell us what's happening in the social services world. Been a busy place.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk about the community needs that we're seeing and how we are addressing them, how our community partners are addressing them, and then if you have any questions about it. So I've broken it down into the basic needs and then some of the other things. So I think one of the most basic needs is food. And as we're seeing in this community, it has just been, the response has been outstanding. There are several providers, several local nonprofits who have really just hit the ground running and are providing a tremendous supply of food to folks in need. They are definitely seeing people that they have not seen before. So I'm hoping that the word is out and the folks that have the transportation to get there are getting there. And then at the same time, there have been organizations that have come together to do delivery. So if you can't get to a place, there's information that's out there about how things can get to you. So I think when it comes to food, the school system is doing what they, the pickups, and then they have partnered to also do some deliveries to motels and neighborhoods and things like that. So, I reached out to all the partners before I came here and said, am I missing anything? Is there anything? And they said, the supply needs to continue, and certainly the food bank is helping with that. Was already one large distribution at Busch Gardens. There might be another one. Salvation Army is doing one in May. So that information hopefully is getting out there. But if you can think of any other ways that we are not getting it out there, please let me know. There's a new program that is coming down in June for students who receive free and reduced lunch through the schools. It's called Pandemic EBT, which is the card that folks on the SNAP program receive. So sometime in June, families of students who receive free and reduced lunch will get a card in the mail. And on that card will be preloaded, I think around $376 per student. And that is money that they will not have to do anything else other than take the card and spend it. They don't have to apply for SNAP. They don't have to do anything. So there's a website, there's information that we're trying to push out there so folks aren't confused when they get this card in the mail and think that they have to apply or they have to do something else. So that information hopefully is out there as well. So if you already receive SNAP, you'll be getting that, and then if you don't receive it, you'll just be getting the card. I believe that should hopefully cover folks who are need food situations. When it comes to housing and shelter, again, we are taking that on a case-by-case basis. We have a lot of partners in the community who have assisted us. We've put several folks in hotels, making sure that we don't have anybody on the street. So as far as we know, every call that we get, we either address it ourselves or we call a partner and have them help us address it. So there's a lot of collaboration that's happening in that. We've applied for some funding, and we will be coming to you guys in June for some funding. There's some additional emergency shelter funds that we just received in the amount of $10,000 that we will be using to pay for the hotels, and so that is going to help out a lot. And then starting in hopefully July, we'll be getting some funds to help people pay for their rent and for utilities that right now there's a moratorium on evictions, and folks, don't need to worry about that. But we all know, eventually that will catch up. And we want to make sure that when that does catch up, that we don't have individuals who are in a serious situation. So we are looking forward to getting that funding and to be able to assist people with the payments that they need. As far as seniors, our senior wellness calls program is going well. So that has been a great collaboration that we have done with our Connect program and with Crosswalk Community Church. So we have continued to reach out. We have information out there. So if anybody who is a senior and who wants kind of a warm, friendly call, I think volunteers have made over 130 calls, and there's been a lot of really good connections. The good news is that some of the folks that we reached out to already felt like they had a good support system. So that certainly is an indication of our community and how people take care of each other and how they have those circles going. So all of our other providers are regularly taking care of their seniors. I do want to give a special thank you to the library. They have been amazing with making face shields. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but we were able to connect them with the nursing homes and the assisted living facilities to make some face shields for the staff there. They've made some for Old Town and all kinds of different providers. And we have some for our staff who are doing home visits as well. So that's been really helpful. Childcare, there are still facilities that are open in this area and that are providing childcare. So I get weekly updates about that. So there's a website if people need to know where they can go to get assistance with childcare. Old Town is open now for appointments only. So they're going to continue to do that for the time being so that they can make sure that they're meeting people's medical needs, but limiting the traffic, doing temperature checks, making sure that people are safe, but also, people need to get their health taken care of. So I believe that's all I have.
I had a question about the program associated with SNAP. Is that $376, I think you said, for the whole summer before school starts up again? And is it targeted for the children?
Yes, I believe that it's a calculation based on the number of days that they weren't physically in the building. So it does run from, I guess, the day that they shut to June. So as far as the summer, I know that prior to all of this, there was talk about a summer SNAP program. I don't know the status of that, but that was something that was previously discussed, but I believe that was for people who were already on the SNAP program. We have seen a significant rise. We've received almost 500 new applications for SNAP since March 16th. So we have a lot more people on the SNAP program, and so they will continue to get the allotment. And there's been bump ups in allotment. So if you didn't receive the max allotment, there's been a couple of push outs where you've received the difference. And so they've been continuing to give folks a little bit more when it comes to food.
I was wondering about, you mentioned child care centers, and I guess I wonder, not necessarily whether things have been done already, but what we may see happening with child care centers as we open up a bit more. Is testing available for workers in child care centers and for the children? We're seeing instances of pediatric related COVID symptoms now that are very troubling, and of course kids can still carry the virus to others.
I don't know. I know that they are, there's guidance out there for child care providers as far as how to safely operate. I have not heard of any testing specifically for child care providers, so I don't know.
I wonder as we begin to, because apparently there is going to be a lot more funding available for testing, especially of essential workers and the like. I wonder if it would be a good idea to comprehensively think about who should be on that list, and I'd say child care centers ought to be a place that we're thinking about from that perspective.
I can certainly follow up. I'm on the distribution list for the folks. I know there's a survey that's being sent out for families about their childcare needs in the future, and that's something that we've been in conversations about with the school system as well, to try and build capacity so that we're not stuck with the outlets are opening up and everybody needs to go back to work tomorrow, and what are we going to do? So there are plans that are happening as far as that, but the question of testing is one I can.
So I've heard this a couple of times from community members, and I'm not saying it's your responsibility. I'm just trying to find out if it's possible and where it might go. People are very anxious to help and volunteer, and maybe even something with food. Is there any website that somebody can go on and say, this is a volunteer need? Or is there a, like a place on the James City County site that if you knew of a need that it could be updated so people had a place that they could go to find out that information? Because I've heard that a lot throughout this. People want to help, they want to contribute, they just don't know how. So just putting it out there for something possible. And then I did have the question about, there's a lot of kids are coming in to enroll in school up until sometimes the very last day of school. So obviously when new people move into our community right now, there's no school building to go enroll in, and so there is no opportunity to apply for the free and reduced lunch program. So how are those families? Is it through SNAP? Is that the best way for those families to sign up for some type of benefit?
It's actually, for that particular program, it's through the local school division. So they would need to contact the school that they are slotted to attend and get their information on the rolls. I don't know if there's a website, and this information will be provided by Mr. Stevens to you guys with all the more detail. I only had 5 minutes, so I didn't go into all the detail. But there is a website. Just kidding. I could go on and on. There is a website that gives you all that information, but there was an information transfer from the Department of Education to BDSS. So it went at the state level. It didn't involve the localities. So all of that information should be on that website. And we did send out a news flash, so there was information that we sent out for the county. So if there's an address change or a guardian change or anything like that. But what I don't know is how ongoing it is. But I would.
Because I don't know if anybody's.
I think there are folks at the school building still. I know that I've, because I do have students, I'm, hearing that and seeing that. So.
I look forward to the information that you're going to send, and I'm sure we've taken you right over 5 minutes. And then, I've had a lot of questions too about the summer, because I know in summer past, we've not been part of the federal government does have a program where they will continue to feed some areas through the summer. I think the closest one was Surrey last year. So I have received some questions on if any of this program that's going on now where the students can go get some of the food during the week, if that will continue. So when you find that out, if you could let us know, that'd be great.
I don't know if it will continue through the school system per se. However, I will say that in summers past, there have been community partners that have stepped up. There's a summer feeding program that they have kind of stood up, and it's always a balance in some ways, because in our community, we are so resource rich and we have so many people that want to help, and so we as local government or school systems haven't necessarily had to fill that gap. So we're incredibly grateful to that, but it's always a balance between, when do we step in and do something, when do we say thank you very much for your service to do something community partner. So I will say that I feel we have weekly calls with all of those partners and us, and we have a website that's shared by providers only to share that information. So we are talking to each other, and again, I did reach out to all the partners to say, am I missing anything? Are there any gaps? So I do feel like we're communicating. So any of those questions, please, let me know, and I'll be happy to find that out. It's going to be a different summer, so it's going to be different things.
Thank you.
Can I just add one other thing, and that is, you know, we've expressed our thanks to our public safety officers. We're trying to make sure that we recognize all the hard work that all of our county staff are putting in. I don't think we always recognize the burden that comes to social services departments at a time like this, when people are in such desperate need. And so, you know, and people are going out and making home visits when that's necessary. And so, you know, let's just make sure we recognize the folks in your department and your hard work to make sure communities' needs are being met.
I really appreciate that. We have 100% of our staff have worked this whole time. We are very fortunate that we were able to have some telework opportunities because we can access our programs, and we had VPNs and that kind of thing, but we've had staff in the office too, and we've kept it rolling. So thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, because I'm sure some of it is very heavy on your hearts and your heads. I'm sure there's been a lot to deal with, so thank you very much.
John Carnifax to speak about activities within Parks and Recreation. And I did hold them to 5 minutes, but as long as you have questions of them, you can ask all you need to.
Thank you.
No time limit on questions.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just a quick update. As you know, back April 1st, we furloughed all of our part-time, 7 to 8 part-time employees. We have 52 full-time, 2 vacancies. So those 50 employees, other than the few that have been taking leave to take care of their family and some spouses who have lost jobs, they've had to stay at home. So other than that, we've been staying busy. We are working at the sites, the convenience centers. We have 10 to 15 employees that have been working at the landfill. The convenience centers are out in our parks. Most of our rec center staff, since that is closed, and our rec programs unit, most of them have been working either at general services or in our parks monitoring. As the chief said, they deal hopefully with few less people violating, because our staff are out there educating, breaking up the groups that are larger than 10, and like the chief said, 99% of our residents comply and are very respectful of the rules. They may disagree with them, but they do follow them for the most part. So our staff's been out there working. Our trail usage is some of our trails are 148 to 150% more than the same time last year. Now, of course, War Hill Sports Complex is down significantly because of none of the sports programs. But our trail usage on all of our trails are up. Between 148 is the highest and 52% on the lowest. So more people are out walking, using the trails, so that's a good thing. What we typically do, you know, the governor has his phase 1 opening and phase 2 coming. So we sit back and we look at the executive orders, and we benchmark with our community around us. We look at through NRPA, which does a survey weekly on how the departments around the country, what are they opening up, what are they not opening up. So we look at that on a weekly basis. You know, right now we have some of our parks open. We're getting ready to open in phase 1 this weekend, the campground. Prior to today, it was for 14 days or longer only. This weekend, unless the governor changes it between now and Friday, you know, short stay campgrounds can't open up. So we're planning on opening that up. The marina has been open the entire time. We just opened the concession to sell gas and services. You know, that just opened up last week. I guess one of the things that's coming up is Memorial Weekend. We plan on operating the Jamestown unless the governor changes. You know, right now the restriction is you have to be moving on the beach, exercising. So unless something happens, we're planning on operating it. We are not going to charge a fee for non-residents like we have in the past Memorial Weekend, because it's not the same as it was before. So right now, anybody that shows up, we're not getting the attendance. This weekend will be a good sign to see how many show up. It's supposed to be nice weather, 82 degrees. So we'll see, but the attendance is significantly down because you cannot sunbathe on the beach. You cannot sit down on the beach. You must walk. You can go in the grassy area at the beach and have a picnic. One of the things that we continue to monitor is, you know, we're looking at phase 2. We're looking down the road because to open the rec center or to start our summer camps, it takes us 2 to 3 weeks between hiring the staff, doing the training. So we're starting to prep for some type of phase 2. The governor said 2 to 4 weeks when you can have 50 people. It starts to become more the opportunity is there for us to do more things when the number gets to 50, both in the rec center. You know, we may have to separate equipment. We may have to move some equipment down in half the gym. We're not going to be opening up the basketball court, the racquetball courts based on CDC guidelines right now. So we're kind of looking at those as draft plans and where we'll be when we get to phase 2, both on the program side and on the rec center side. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. I know y'all have received quite a few emails from some private businesses of what can open and what can't. I've talked to a few of them that I've seen and talked to them and try to walk through the process and the county's role as it relates to an executive order by the governor and what we can and we can't do. And so I've walked through the few that you've sent, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have right now on what we have open, what we're thinking for the future, and go from there.
Thank you very much, and thank you for, I know that I spoke to someone yesterday who had said that they had gotten a return call from you, so I appreciate that very much. What are you, so you're waiting for phase 2, but typically our James City County pools open Memorial Day weekend, which will not happen. Do you foresee pools at all? Because I have received that, I'm not talking about neighborhood pools, I'm talking strictly about James City County pools. What do you think?
I think unless the governor changes something in his phase 2, we think we can operate the outdoor pools with the 50 capacity and the separation. It's how many people we will allow in there, and we're looking at that both at the rec center, like how many people would be in a fitness area at one time. Right now, I think if you look at your businesses, they're 50%, coming up 50% capacity on their outdoor areas. If the same thing happens to us in any of our facilities, then we're looking at how to control the number of people in the building, in the pool. Should we schedule in advance online? If you want to have a 2 or 3 hour Upper County Park pool experience, can you register online? Some communities are already starting that. And then let's say you limit it to 30 people. If you only have 20 that sign up online, they get in, and you got 10 more you can handle if they walk up, and how we handle that fee. Typically, it's a $5 per day fee. If we're going to go to limiting them to 2 or 3 hours schedules, do we adjust our fee? So those are the things that we're going to work on between now and but our plan is to open up if we get to that phase 2, as long as it's following the CDC guidelines, the governor's executive order, not to violate something he has in there, and then, of course, discussion with county admin and the board as we approach those times. So.
Plus, you'll have to probably work with your employees, because some people may not be so nice if they come walking up and they didn't register online and they can't get into the pool. So hopefully people will keep in mind that a lot of people that are working the pools are teenagers, and they're trying to do the best they can do with the information that they've also been provided.
And safety, and we're already working with General Services on plexiglass at all of our customer service areas. We've got them set up at the rec center now, and we will have them at the outdoor pools. Have waterproof masks for our lifeguards to wear. So we're researching everything, we're benchmarking, and we'll be prepared to open up as we can, and we will start bringing back some of the part-time staff as we start to open up. And, one of the things that you all know is that we generate 50 to 60% of our operating costs through fees. So one of the things that I can't predict is how fast is our revenue going to come back to what it normally is. My feeling is that until there's a vaccine, that our attendance will be down both at the rec center and at our groups, classes, and things. And so I think that I'm going to continue to manage our budget as efficiently as I can to make sure we stay in that, trying to recover 50%. So the part-time staff will play a significant role on that. They will not all come back, when we open up. I'll work through it. We'll get through the first quarter of 21. We'll see what our revenue is doing, how many people are attending classes, how many are coming to the parks, and, adjust accordingly. So that's the plan.
Thanks very much. I know that it's very difficult to manage all this, and people want to get out and enjoy exercise and so forth. but the ability to keep distance and to wear masks, which I know in Williamsburg in the summer is not the easiest thing in the world to do. But these are kind of critical things that are important, and so I think it's going to be really important for us to send a strong message to the citizens to, exactly as Ms. Larson was saying, just to remind folks that regulations that are in place for public safety, for public health, and we want to be able to provide opportunities, but we can only do that as long as we keep the health situation under control.
I will just add that I'm on the trails probably 5 days out of 7, and there's not been, everybody's respecting, some people stop and turn around, or, so they don't, a lot of people just walk single file. There's not been an issue, and several times we've run into people, especially on the War Hill, driving a gator, I guess, and keeping good grooming of the trail and all of that. So very much appreciated. If I didn't have those
know the Green
trails,
Springs Trail is the one that's up 148%, so that
it's,
explains the challenges of, the toilet paper tends to go missing in our portable toilets quite frequently, and the hand sanitizer, so that's been a big challenge.
yeah, that one is very, very busy. So, but again, even with it as busy as it is, it seems to work out, so it's not all crowded, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Grace Boone, our Director of General Services, to talk about some of the operations in our county buildings and what we're doing to prepare.
Really, our main focus from the beginning has been on safety, supplying our PPE, making sure our buildings are disinfected, making sure we have the right equipment to be able to do those tasks. As Ryan stated early on, it was extremely difficult to get hand sanitizer and disinfectant and all these other things, but the supply chain has caught up with demand, so we are in pretty good shape at this. Fire, particularly Bernadette Williams, has been critical in helping us get some of these supplies. I think she knows everybody from here to the mountain, if anybody knows Bernadette. Now that we have most of our supplies on hand, we put in place a process for all the departments to order supplies through the employee portal. That's emailed down to General Services, and then they either pick it up or we're delivering those supplies. We are working on searching different procedures. We're putting together a guideline on how to, properly clean your workspace, how to take off your gloves without infecting, yourself again because of, if you had any germs on the gloves. And then our hand sanitizing stations have been installed in most buildings. Since our facilities have been temporarily closed to the public, our custodial staff has been visiting facilities twice per day, concentrating on touch points and restrooms. We know that we're going to have to continue that service as we open up, bringing our employees back to ensure that they feel safe. So we're working with purchasing and human resources and parks and recreation to make sure that we have enough staff to continue to provide that service. Our facility staff, they've also been extremely busy. They've put all the blue marks on, the social distancing, 6 foot apart. They have been customizing numerous social distancing barriers for, as John said, at the parks, in the buildings, and we're trying to get that at every transition counter. They've also been discussing adjustments and improvements to the ventilation system and other systems just to keep the buildings healthy. So the biggest surprise, I guess I would say, and it's not just for our jurisdiction but others, is the amount of yard waste and trash that are coming into solid waste facilities around the area and probably around the country. So every person is taking advantage of, you know, being at home and doing their honey-do list or all those projects that they've put off. And with the increase in customers, you know, that comes making sure that we are protecting our own staff. So in March and April of last year, well, during the months of our March and April last year, we had an additional 2,300 customers this March and April over last year. So that's, you know, counted all the sites, but most of them have been coming to Jolly Pond, you know, dropping off debris. So the things we've put in place is each site also has a social distancing barrier for staff. It works better at some places than others. Jolly Pond is very busy and people are used to, you know, staying in their cars. So we just ask folks if they can get out and be mindful of the attendant also. We have diverted our yard waste to the back of Jolly Pond on the weekends, as those are our heaviest times. So that way we reduce the influx into the convenience center, but also reduces the queuing on Jolly Pond, because we do have that issue at Jolly Pond of traffic that sits out there. And really, early on, we had an issue with staffing, and so we had several people out, but, you know, in working with Parks and Recreation, John's crew has been critical in keeping these services running. And also, the support we're getting from Parks and Rec, with so many people coming and helping us, and we've had to train many more people. It's not totally complicated, but, you know, certain sites do different things. So the Parks and Recreation folks volunteered to go ahead and put a training document together for us. So that has been fantastic, and I really appreciate that. So we'll be able to use that for training our folks going forward. You know, we've been extremely busy, but we've also accomplished some things. We've taken advantage of you know, the little bit of the downtime at the beginning when we were kind of like silent. And so since the suspension of sports, we've really done some great work on our athletic fields. We've taken the opportunity to do some of the deep fertilization that is needed in order to rejuvenate that turf. We've developed a smart sign app in conjunction with mapping that evaluates all of our street sign conditions. So we're working through that, trying to get that into a database so we can sort and figure out which signs we need to replace first. So we're trying to work through that process. Our fleet division was able to complete the upfit of the rest of our police vehicles. They've been working on process improvement. The Stormwater Division is working with Community Development and IRM on steps towards a more customer service-friendly online system for as-built submittals. And the CIP staff, you know, work hasn't stopped, so we have slowed down looking at projects to see if we are going to be forward, but stuff that was in the queue, we're still out monitoring and, you know, documenting those. Our administrative staff is trying to keep up with the PPE tracking. We don't have a warehouse, so we're managing by spreadsheet, everybody's first nightmare. But, you know, they're doing fantastic. And last but not least, the recycling staff hasn't missed a beat. And I would like to just say that I wanted to take a moment to thank the general services employees who work, you know, behind the scenes, and they are part, you know, and they're continue to provide those essential services, and I'm proud of the work that we do every day. But I also wanted to thank the entire JCC team, because every time I called and I said, hey, I need you, they said, absolutely, how can I help? So I really do appreciate all of our staff.
And you thought that recycling was your biggest challenge of the year, Grace.
Well, somebody said I created this, so it was a diversion from recycling, but that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, I want to second your thanks to the staff. You know, it's so nice to be able to see that things are, still in great condition, that everybody's working hard to make sure that citizens feel like when they go out on the trail that it's well maintained, that if they go into any kind of county facility that it's being protected well. And I know that you're putting extra thought into the question of when the public comes into our buildings again, that they feel safe and secure in dealing our county staff. Thank you, and thank your staff.
Thank you so much for everything and your staff. It's incredible. And just the PPE piece and making sure that we're ready moving forward, because that could possibly make a difference on what happens in our community as far as shutting down or being prepared and having our most vulnerable, stay self-quarantine, that kind of thing. So it's very, very important that we're prepared moving forward. So thank you so much for everything.
Getting close. Thank you, Grace. Patrick Teague, talk a little bit about safety in our office space, and Jason will wrap us up with sort of reopening comments and see if you have other questions.
Adam, are you? Excellent. I'm here to provide you an overview of how we are and planning on in the future to keep our workforce safe as we progress through the phased opening process. A bit of a timeline. Most of you are probably in the same position everyone on staff is, which this feels like it's been going on for about 8 months. But in reality, we really started addressing this around January the 31st. And then when we move to the next slide, you'll see on March the 17th is when you confirmed our disaster declaration and the actual state of emergency for the county began. So where we are now is we're looking at a phased approach to opening. And as you heard tonight, there are several departments that are almost operating at the same level they were prior to the closing, while they still have to address new issues like PPE and social distancing. A lot of their day-to-day activities still remain the same. And we began increasing staff in our offices the week of May the 4th, while maintaining, again, the 10-person grouping and the 6 feet distance requirements. And we're continuing to increase our in-office staffing levels and commensurately reducing our telework as facilities reopen to the public. Some of our facilities will have delayed openings depending on the service, specifically our rec center, as you heard tonight, and library. There are many facets within those facilities that may not immediately open to the public as pieces of that facility open. We'll have different requirements and operational needs. Social distancing may require appointments for some of our offices, while others are going to be able to open to the public without restriction depending on capacity limits. In some, we may require masks, while others, it may be strongly encouraged. And then what we're workplace specifically giving to our folks is reminding the 6 feet social distancing, frequent hand washings of 20 seconds, covering your face and elbow when sneezing, staying home when you don't feel well, which, as Ruth mentioned earlier, is really important that folks have the leave available to stay home, and that individuals notify human resources and self-quarantine when they display symptoms and either is cleared by a physician or are 14 days symptom-free before returning to work. We've talked quite a bit tonight about PPE, and so you've heard about disposable and reusable face masks and gloves, hand sanitizer stations. We also provide the sanitizer wipes in each of our areas. High traffic areas, we are getting the cleaning twice a day for touch points, and we are working on rolling out a daily health screening questionnaire and non-touch thermometers to all our offices. And you may recognize the gentleman on the right. He's displaying one of our amazing clear barriers at our public service desks that help, as well as the floor markings, to increase that social distancing. And we are rolling out an exposure response plan that will include a full office disinfection and what's required for a notification protocol. And we did mention a little bit about regular sick leave. 2 of the new benefit programs we've rolled out that were effective April 1 are the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act that's up to 80 hours to address COVID absences, and then the Emergency Family Medical when it's an issue regarding child care similar to the regular family medical leave. You have 12 weeks of but this is partially paid by the federal government to address any child care issues associated. And then our regular benefit offerings are the liberal use of leave, vacation, sick, paid time off, telework, continuing when operationally feasible and needed for the social distancing. And we, through our contract with the Employee Assistance Program, we give all our staff 5 free counseling consultations per issue. So that could be anywhere from calling regarding your finances 5 times, followed by you may have a child development issue you want to talk about. You get another 5 free visits or consultations. Questions?
Let me just say one thing, and that is I've been impressed with and think you've done a great job in pushing out information about the Employee Assistance Program, which I think people don't necessarily recognize that they're under a lot of stress in situations like this, and just reminding them that there's an opportunity, that there is a program out there that should make them understand that we know that there will be times when people need some help is very valuable. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, our last one under this topic, at least presenters, Jason Purse, talk about our reopening guidelines and just get your direction on that. Jason?
I think Patrick covered a lot of the salient points of the reopening plan, but from a procedural standpoint, on March 13th, the county facilities were closed, and then on March 17th, the board ratified that decision with their emergency ordinance and then subsequently re-ratified in April. What Mr. Stevens and I are hoping for tonight is for the board to concur with the phased reopening plan that we have before you with the attached resolution. Just to be clear, again, this is a phased plan. This isn't flipping a switch. We'd like to bring staff back gradually, slowly, and deliberately to make sure that it's a safe environment for staff and then for the public as well. We'll be following a lot of the orders from the governor's office and mimicking those of the other businesses in the locality. I think next week you'll see a majority of staff return to the office setting to start with that evaluation process, and then working with Ms. Boone's office and general services to make sure we have all the equipment necessary to implement that safely. So with that being said, the ordinance is before you now, or excuse me, the resolution is before you now, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
Do you have any questions? You have the ordinance. Motion? Okay. Need a motion? Motion for approval? Stevens?
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion carries. Mr. Chair, one late item that I had mentioned to board members related to some federal money. We did receive notice today that the Commonwealth was going to release 50% of the Federal CARES Act locality-based allocations on or around June 1st. James City County's allocation is approximately $6.7 million, so we should receive just over $3.3 million in June. This funding cannot presently be used to replace lost revenues, but can be used for COVID-19 expenditures from March 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. We will learn more about how to best leverage these funds and ensure we are able to retain or use all that our community is eligible to receive. And we have put a resolution together. It does require a letter that was basically a letter provided to us from the Commonwealth that the chairman, myself, and our FMS director, Ms. Sharon Day, would need to sign. And if you are comfortable with that letter, again, it is their letter, but authorizing us to sign that letter on your behalf, we would get that in so that the letters due May 22nd, and that would get the money here in early June, or at least half of that, $6.7 million.
Mr. Chairman, I move the resolution authorizing the signature of the letter.
Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And I would note here at that point is that this is where we will find out, because it appears that we can use some of that money for COVID-related things, such as our business program that we were
Yes, sir,
looking
that
at
does
trying
appear to
do.
be eligible.
Which means that at the time we do get that, then we can go through the process of putting the money back in and then using it.
And I wonder if things like the position we just approved today, at least the payment for the first 6 months of that
months, yeah.
position.
Yes, sir. I believe anything we're doing in excess, meaning we're cleaning more, we have more staff cleaning, we have more cleaning supplies. I think all of those things, along with that position that you approved this evening, would be eligible until the end of December. That would be my expectation as well.
And the school system would be eligible as well to add into.
I don't know enough about it yet to tell you that with certainty. I think so. I did share what came out with our superintendent, so at least she had that same information. But if it benefits us, there'll be some benefit there as well. Whether they're directly eligible or not, I'm uncertain, but we certainly will ask those questions as we get into these webinars and try to figure that out.
Yeah, we got a couple. This is at the end of our board consideration, so if you want, we can go to best directives if you would like to.
We discussed, and to help staff and help the school board as well to move forward, we discussed the 10% and agreed upon it, but I don't think we actually took like a straw vote. I'd like to take an actual vote on it, that we're gonna, go with the 10, and so it gives a clear message that, we're hoping that it's less than 10. We're planning on 10. If it needs to be adjusted, the budget will need to be adjusted with it, and if it goes to 15% or whatever, then we'll have to adjust as we know. Hopefully it'd be 3 or less, which would be very nice, and everybody gets their money back to where we were when we started. And, and I just, a lot of things there's a lot of tough work up here on this board right now, trying to figure out where things are, where we're going, what we're doing, and all that, and we don't have a crystal ball. We make decisions with the amount of knowledge that we have at the time, and hopefully we've made positive decisions for the community and for the school and everyone connected to it. And, with that being said, I'd like to bring a motion forward to the 10% that we agreed on, so that the school board then will have a clear definition of where we're starting. Where we end up, we don't know. Hopefully, we'll end up in a better situation than we have right now, but if we do, the money that is appropriated to the school, the 52%, goes back to the school. And, we're just planning on what happens and what possibilities could be out there. Hopefully, it's a lot less than 10, but if it's more, we're gonna have to relook at that, and it'll be painful for all of us, but we have to plan for that, and that's a job you elected us to do, and we're going to pursue that job and do it the best of our ability. So a motion.
So your motion is to formally vote on the direction to the county staff to prepare the budget for the 10% cut. Yes, sir. Okay. We have any discussion with the motion?
I don't think I have any real problem with the motion, as long as we understand that it was direction to the county staff to prepare a proposal based on that assumption. We won't actually adopt a budget until later, until June 9th, and by that time, we may already have some information, for instance, about how this money can be used, the state money money that's passed through from the state that was part of the CARES Act. And whether there's going to be another stimulus package that is going to come through. If it's just a matter of formalizing what we did at the last meeting, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah. And that's all I want to do. And as we all know, if we find out in 3 months that we need to adjust our budget, hopefully to the good, and we will, and we'll adjust it then and make another motion. But this is just for record keeping.
All right. Any other discussion?
Well, let me just say one other thing, and because I have a lot of respect for our school board and understand that they are feeling the concern over having to deal with a set of limited resources, I just do also want to make it clear that we appropriate funds, but the school board makes the decisions about priorities. And I think it is important to make clear that we're not really looking at forcing a set of choices within whatever resources we're able to provide.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I meant to mention that, and thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, we don't tell the board, the school board, what to do with their funds. We give them the funds that we think we can supply to them, and then it's up to that elected board to decide how they're going to spend it and what they're spending on and that sort of thing. And, you know, I think the general public sometimes thinks that we're cutting the school. We're living within our means. We're not cutting the school. We would love to fund the school totally if we had those funds. But we've got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's what we're doing in this situation. And so we're not cutting the school. Yes, the school's going to get less money, possibly due to this, but everyone's going to get less money. So it's not we're just picking out the school. And if we end up able to recover quicker, the school gets that recovery as well. So we're in partnership, and I talked to the chairman, and she's in agreement with how we're working things and what we're doing. And of course, she wants the school totally funded, and I don't blame her there. You know, I think that she's fighting for her school, and which I agree with. And just like when we fight for certain things, fire, EMS, and everything else in the county, we're fighting for certain things as well. But we've come in as a team, and we talked, and so we're going to work as a team. I think our biggest thing is what we're getting from Richmond. And I think she's going to put something out as well, hopefully, that talks about, you know, maybe we take, because we're all friends and neighbors, we all represent the same people. I have 3 children still in school, and I've had them in there for a long time. And I love our schools. I think our schools do excellent work. Don't want to see any harm to any of our schools. I love what our schools are doing. And thank you for the teachers, thank you for the staff, and everything you do for us. But this is a decision that we have to make, because there is, or possibly may not be, money to fund everything we need. So that's what we're looking at, is it's a funding issue, not a heart issue. If it was a heart issue, we would try everything we can, which we have, to fully fund it. But when the money's not there, we've got to use our heads and figure out how do we appropriate it and what we need to do. So thank you to the schools and everything they do, and all the efforts you have in there. And thank you, John, for bringing that up. I missed that one item. But, you know, we're all family, the Board of Supervisors, the school board, and the community. We live here together. We do our best job working as a team and making sure that, you know, sometimes an email comes across that seems harsh, and it's not intended to be that way, I'm sure. And we just got to remember that we're all under pressure, we're all working together, and we're all trying to make James City County a better community at the end of this than when we went into it. So thank you.
I have no problem with the 10%, because that's what we agreed to. I mean, I have a lot of problems with the 10%, but I realize the reality that we're facing. However, given what we've pointed out, that we will be approving our budget in June, but I have asked for some figures that I have not, and the county administrator has not had an opportunity to do that, because I do think that, and I was going to bring this up in board directives, because I think transparency is going to be the key. Our localities around us may be choosing to stick with the budget that they have, and so I'd like to know how they plan to address any possible shortfalls. They may have a different budget makeup than we do, so we need to have that information. But I don't want to this is a huge impact to the schools. So, I mean, the lists that we've seen on what is going to be impacted, and while yes, they make the decision on how to program, when they are losing 10% of their budget, the cuts are going to come deep. And so I want to make sure that people are aware that we are very much aware of that. And the impact is, listening to Ms. Vinroot talk about childcare. What does that look like if the school division makes a decision regarding how they're going to be meeting in the fall? And what happens to kids that may be at home potentially without supervision, which is a possibility because people are going to be getting back to work. So I have no problem with advocacy because, frankly, that's what pushed me along was being an advocate. But I also go back to, I think at some point we have to put this information out on our website as to why we're not, because we keep getting questions about the reserves. If we can even have the little clip of the explanation of that, and exactly what this reduction, why the difference in our taxes because of this. We've also already received one email from somebody saying, how dare you send me my property tax bill? I'm lost my job. I'm sure, it's great that we've pushed that out, but I'm not sitting here thinking we're going to get 100% without some pursuing that we're going to have to do, which is going to put us even further behind the revenue. We're very aware of the fact that people are not, some people are not working currently, and so it is going to be a struggle for us to collect all the revenues that we need to collect. But we do need you to pay your property tax because we need to keep the county operating, and that includes schools, police, fire, parks and rec, all of our services that we do. But I am well aware of what this type of cut is going to do. So, thank you.
And I don't want to minimize the cut at all. In fact, I think one of the important reasons to have a budget proposal come forward that shows the 10% reduction is to show what the cost of that is. We need to make the case as strongly as we possibly can to our state and federal partners of the need to address this situation of revenue loss. That it's not just a matter of the direct costs of the pandemic. It's also the need to make sure that services are provided, that people are employed, and that kids aren't falling farther behind, that families aren't being put in desperate situations, that we can maintain proper order in society, and all the rest of the functions that are going on here. So I think it's all of a piece. I'm optimistic. I'm always an optimist about these things, and I do think that we will find that there is an appetite for helping counties get through this situation. And because we are partners with our school system, and we know that we provide a majority of our county revenues do go to the schools, that they will share in whatever additional funding that we're able to attain. It's important for us to, on the one hand, send the message that this is serious, and on the other hand, point out that maintaining the ability of our county to fully fund the functions that we have is crucial, and that the federal government has the ability to do something about that. I took the opportunity. I know Ms. Larson, as the representative for this geographic area on Virginia Association of Counties Board of Directors, you've been advocating for us with the state government, and I've reached out to state legislators as well to try to find out what's going to happen there. I think they know they're going to have to revisit their budget and see how things are going, but they don't expect to really know too much for the next couple of months. There is activity going on in Washington, and I talked to our federal representatives, some of our federal representatives, and I know Ms. Sadler is reaching out to Congressman Whitman on this as well. to encourage support for more flexibility on the already approved aid to local governments so that we can use it for revenue replacement. There is legislation in Congress right now to do that, and also for an additional package of relief, financial relief, that would specifically allocate money to help make up revenue declines. And I'm pleased to say that I know both of our senators have signed on to that legislation. Congresswoman Luria has signed on to it, and I'm hoping that Congressman Whitman also will be supportive of that.
Thank you for bringing that up, because there is something at the federal level now that they would, a bill 1,815 pages long, that would provide, currently as it's written, for some opportunity for localities to have some revenue replacement. So it is very important that we do try to advocate on the federal level. On the VACO call, they thought that it would be able to get through the House, but they were a little concerned about the Senate. So when on our call with the governor last week, he implied that it would be June timeframe when he would bring back the General Assembly to revisit balancing that budget. So it's going to be a little bit of time. I know that 50% is coming to the counties. It was pointed out that it does not say that in the legislation or the guidelines, but they are doing that. They were not so forthcoming on the second half of the 50%. So I would hope that they might use some of that money. I know they can't use it as revenue replacement, but is there, I'd hope that there might be a way to use it to put in the education budget to possibly help, because I know they're looking at some losses on the state level as well. So, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, are we ready to take a vote on that motion? All right, Mr. Stevens?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, I would like to bring up one other thing, and this was as our discussions earlier. I think I've talked to everybody on the board. I would like to see if we can do something to help alleviate a little bit of what is obviously pretty onerous to the schools. We've done some to help our businesses. I'd like to see if we can do a little bit to help the schools. When we did the 10% and we did the 52-48 split, that basically made it the requirement to cut $420,000 more from the schools than was originally proposed under the 50-50 split. I would like to see us give direction to the county administrator to look at building into the budget an additional $300,000 if we can to try to help the schools. I think it would give them the ability to deal with some of their operational issues a little bit better. Still keeping in mind that we still have the 52-48 split for future considerations one way or the other. But this would be an opportunity to be able to come up with some money to try to help them with that. I believe that the best source of that would actually be if we are able to use this federal money that's coming down to us to pay for this program of $500,000 for businesses, then we can use that money to reimburse ourselves for what we've just spent out of our CIP, and that money would then be available. We could use part of that to help fund the schools for the next year. So I would like to make a motion that we give direction to the county administrator to consider putting $300,000 back into schools, and the funding mechanism to be determined over the next couple of weeks as we go through our CIP and then finally to our final budget approval.
I can support that.
Right. Any discussions? Sue, you okay?
Okay.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. I believe we are now down to anything left for board requests and directives.
No, I don't think so.
Just that,
Okay.
no, go ahead.
Okay, I did just want to say one thing, and that is, let me take the opportunity to, I'm sure we have the vast viewing audience out there today, but just to really take the opportunity to encourage people to recognize that as uncomfortable or as geeky as you might think they are, although I think my Orioles face mask is really neat, the fact of the matter is that the guidelines from the CDC on hand washing, on face masks, on maintaining that 6-foot distance are critically important. You know, I was listening to the testimony today in Washington about the way in which this whole situation is played out. And the most striking thing to me was when they pointed out that in South Korea, there have been fewer than 300 deaths. We have just passed 82,000. And what's the difference? Two things. One is that they very early on did aggressive testing. Well, we didn't do that, but we can try to make up for it now and isolate cases where we find somebody who's who has been exposed to the disease and try to do our best to get them isolated and to contact people who've been around them. But the other thing that they do is they have been rigorous about those hygiene matters. You know, you're not wearing the mask to protect you, you're wearing it to protect everybody else. And if we can really be serious about this, I know that people in this community are wary about reopening because I hear it all the time. And I know that those who have any concern about any underlying health conditions or just the demographics of who's affected by this, that they're going to take extra care for it. But this is something that everybody needs to be aware of, whether you're young, old, healthy, sick, and I just want to make that plea. So with that, I'll move on.
I just would encourage if we could continue to up our budget, what I spoke about before. The more information I think that we can push out, the better, so that there's somewhat, at least there's a place to point people to. Just to also say that the Tourism Council, my finance meeting is Thursday at, I believe, 5 o'clock. It's either 4 or 5. If anybody wants the call-in information on that, please let me know. And then we do have our Tourism Council meeting next week. The Tourism Council has continued to be very active. They are trying to wait to a respectful amount of time and also watching what the governor's doing before pushing out any marketing. But they have been working this entire time. They have been staying in contact with our attractions. And, so I don't want anyone to think they have not been active. I know that Mr. Stevens and I have a Virginia Peninsula Regional Jail meeting next week. That will also be some type of meeting online that we'll be doing. But, and we also received an email today regarding an article that ran, and the superintendent talked about how he's been keeping employees safe and the public safe while having the occupants do some outside work. So if anybody has any questions about that, we're happy to forward his email. And I apologize, but I'm going to change. I would like to go into closed session regarding the appointments.
Oh, I'm good. You good? Do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, I know we've taken some time to thank the staff and the wonderful job that they're doing, that they always do. But I just did want to take a moment to make sure that Chris Johnson understands how much I appreciate, and I know that all of us appreciate what he does for the business community as the Director of Economic Development, his willingness to participate in this program to help our small businesses. It's huge, and I appreciate so much all of his help with navigating through this. And I hope our citizens understand that our businesses are part of the backbone of this community and what a huge role it plays for them to invest in us as a locality. So I thank our small businesses, I thank our large businesses, but I really wanted to make sure I give a special shout out to Chris Johnson for what a wonderful job he's doing.
I'm gonna jump back in and make a comment, one, because I know how difficult it is to arrange to move Miss Sadler over, so perhaps we could wait on,
Can we just do this?
You can do it right here.
Yeah.
oh, we can?
Sure.
We
Yeah.
just go
We
off?
don't have to go on the
Oh,
other
okay,
road.
Yeah,
great.
we can do that.
So, but one thing that has come up in some of my VACO calls is some different things that some communities are doing. And one that they were doing was, and I know everybody's working hard to encourage people to eat out, but they took a certain day, like, April 10th or something, and it was Eat Out James City, well, it was whatever the county they were in, eat out that day or whatever. And they worked with the restaurants in their community and the different takeout establishments to really talk about it. To restaurants did something special for that night. I'd like to see if we can work towards something like that, maybe, because I realize that, maybe with them coming back at 50% occupancy outside, they may not be interested, but I'd like to know if anybody is interested, because it's still going to be a couple of weeks before they are probably running any larger than that. If there might be a possibility of us trying to pull something like that together. So, thank you.
Okay, we are now to reports to the county administrator.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I do have two items I'd like to share. One you alluded to earlier, tax payments. We have had some residents tell us they should not have to pay their taxes due to the COVID-19 crisis that is occurring. And what we have shared is that is not something the county can allow and still be able to provide the needed services to our community. So to our residents, the message has been we still need for them to pay what they can pay towards their taxes that are owed. The Board of Supervisors has to treat taxpayers the same. We can't differentiate between those that are having hardship and those that are not. And you have put in place some areas to help all of our taxpayers if they have the need. You've eliminated the credit card convenience fee and late penalties until August 5th. So on their property taxes, personal and real, if they don't pay until August 5th, all they would pay is a 10% annual interest rate, which is 0.83% per month. So a fairly low interest rate per month if they're unable to pay by the June 5th deadline. So we would certainly encourage them to take advantage of that if they need to, and the ability to pay by credit card if they're able to do that with no penalty or no fee charged to them from the credit card company or the county. Our treasurer and commissioner revenue, just in terms of reopening, are allowed public access to their buildings because it is tax time. We encourage people to call and pay online, but the staff is there in the office if needed, and they are letting people to walk into the buildings. We had not publicly announced that, but they have had some steady traffic in the last 2 days as people are coming to pay their bills, and so we have marked the floor. Some residents, there's very limited queuing of residents inside. So once we get about 10 of our residents here to pay their taxes, the rest will have to wait outside. And we are talking about how to make that a little more comfortable if we have rain or sunny weather and those kinds of things. But we ask for their patience with that as we work through that process. In terms of reopening county facilities, we have talked about a plan. We will work through that and try to do that in a safe manner for our staff and for the public. And the schedule really will depend on the governor, his direction to our businesses. We'll try to mimic something that looks similar with his Virginia Forward plan so that our message is consistent. But beginning next week, we definitely will meet with members of the public by appointment. We're able to do that really today as we have staff back in the offices. And so our message would be to call or email, and if we can't help you remotely, we'll figure how to meet with you in person where we need to make sure that you're able to conduct your business with the county. I do ask our residents to continue to be patient with us. It is frustrating for all of us, these different things that we're having to do. We appreciate their continued patience, and as we reopen our county facilities and then our businesses, we hope we're able to follow at the same time or shortly thereafter. We are recommending, not requiring, but recommending, based on the CDC guidance, that you wear a face covering when you're visiting county facilities. Please be considerate of our employees and others. To Mr. McGlennon's standpoint, you really are wearing those face coverings to protect others around you, so we would encourage that, particularly when you're in crowded areas or visiting county offices. And if possible, bring your own mask with you. And as I've stated before, your county staff has been and is still working, so please don't hesitate to call us as needed. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will And then I'll entertain a motion to enter closed session for the consideration of personnel matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and or commissions pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we are in closed session all week. session. I need a motion to certify our closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I move to certify we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Ms. Chris Hamilton Petty's, Mr. Lafayette Jones, and Mr. Mark Jakubowski to 3-year terms on the Historical Commission, and Mr. Julian Lipscomb, Mr. Michael Hand, and Kevin Radcliffe to 4-year terms on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee.
and the expiration dates are listed on the things.
April 12th.
Their
June 30th on
appointments
the first
expired on April 12th, 2020, so I assume it will be April 12th, 2024.
Okay, very good. Mr. Stevens, we have a motion.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn until 4 p.m. on May the 26th for the work session.
Motion.
A motion, Mr. Stevens?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye,
Motion carries.
we are adjourned.